Why do we have so much trouble confessing what we believe, sharing the faith, if you will? I don't know. Do you know? I do have an idea, though. Oh, nice red light. I like the way that guy has his brakes on. He actually doesn't have his brakes on because his blinker was brighter. But I like the red light. Kind of cool, like being washed in the blood. Anyway, why do we struggle to confess what we believe? Could be any number of reasons why. Not the least of which is that even if we were taught what we believe in our good old Lutheran catechism classes, how many people spend a lot of time rereading that, restudying that, relearning that? Even every couple of years, every 5 years, let alone more or less. I know when I was first joining the Lutheran Church, I had to read the small catechism. But that was it. And the pastor asked me and my wife if we believed what we read. We didn't have to recite anything like the kids do. It was just go to these classes, read this very small book, ultimately, and say that that's what you believe, and bam, you're a member of the Lutheran Church. The Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. I thought that was a great thing at the time because I was coming out of Roman Catholicism. My wife was coming out of Methodaptocostalism, non-denominationalism, all these kind of things. I'll let her tell her own story someday, but it was nice for me to find a place where when I was reading through the small catechism, I was like, yep, I believe all that. When was the next time? When was the last time I picked it up and really read it? Like many people, even many Lutherans, it was a while. It was after I started teaching. And it was kind of crazy. Because when I picked it up and started rereading it, I got even more out of it. And even though I did that as something that I wanted to have in my quiver, as some people would say, and I was beginning to read the Bible and beginning to cross-reference and study the Bible, no one had taught me how to do any of these things. I think I was young and bold. Young. I was not young. I was younger and bolder, maybe. And I was willing to have more conversations with people because I knew enough. I knew a little bit about what we believed, but it didn't stand up in the beginning to much challenge, much pressure. So I took the attitude that a lot of people take, which is, well, let's just not talk about what we disagree about. Let's not say, well, I don't understand why you don't believe in the real presence, the bodily presence of Christ in, with, and under the bread and wine. But hey, you're a Christian. So let's just Move along. Let's go along to get along. That changed over time, obviously. But what I've been pondering for a while, sorry if my thoughts are a little random, it is drive time. It's a wee 5:42 in the morning here in the Cafe Sola drive to work. By the way, do you like my coffee mug? It's a KFUO coffee mug. It's wonderful. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of Christ. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that I was a little bit more bold, like a lot of people are when they first come to faith or first start learning. And I think then I started to realize, for whatever reason, still working on this one a little bit, a lot of other people from other denominations, non-denominations, non-believers, they share what they apparently don't believe, or believe and don't believe, whatever, all the time. They seem to have all the answers, or lots of answers at least, or at least the confidence to restate whatever they have heard. And back then it wouldn't have been on the interwebs. Back then it would have been on something they read, or a sermon, or a class, or a song, or whatever. They were very bold to restate what they wanted to say. And from my point of view, as I was learning and growing more confessional and growing more into the Lutheran Church, I started realizing there were more than just a few little, not so little, differences between us, and they didn't care. They were just out there boldly confessing what they believed, teach, and confess, even if it was wrong. And that made me stop and wonder, why was I so hesitant to engage people with what I believe and what I would teach and what I confess? Sometimes I think it's because most people, and I still believe this to be true even though the internet tends to make us think otherwise, most people don't really like confrontation because it challenges them to believe with conviction what they believe. And it's just uncomfortable, especially if it's with a friend or a relative or a loved one or a family member. People just don't want to create that kind of tension. And how often are we around some of these people? We're around them once a year, twice a year. And we want to have a good time, and we don't want to get them angry or have them not like us, not want to come to the next holiday event. Are we giving them enough credit? Or does this actually prove itself out to be true? Sometimes, in my experience, it proves itself out to be true. There are people who believe their wrong beliefs so strongly that if you challenge them at all and say, hey, I understand you believe that you can get healthy by just praying, or get wealthy by just praying, or get prosperous by just praying, or win the lottery by just praying. You don't have to go to the doctor to get healthy. You don't have to work hard to be wealthy. You don't have to do anything. You just tell God what you want and He has to give it to you. And you challenge Him on that and say, I understand that, but where did you get that from? Where did you learn that? Why do you believe that? conversations often end fairly quickly at that point. And someone you may have been talking to every week, every month, every couple months, in between major events that you would gather together for, will suddenly stop returning your calls, your texts, your emails, your tweets, whatever, because they got offended by the fact that you challenged something that they believe with all their heart, as it were. They were always taught that. What this can cause is, unfortunately, a desire to not be as bold in your confession as you might want. Now, I don't want to get too much into that. At the moment, I want to move on and say that the other reason that I'm pondering is this idea that other people seem so sure about what they believe, and sometimes we don't. I don't think we're sure about what we believe. I think too many of us think, I'm no pastor, I'm no seminary theologian, professor, I'm no so-and-so on the YouTube or the Facebook or the podcast. They're educated. They know more than I do. They are more articulate than I am. They can remember all these fancy terms. I know I've heard this Greek term before, or this person or this ism before, but I don't recall it the way they seem to recall it. And credit where credit's due. They do. They're smart. They do know a lot. But is that supposed to cause us to only let them be the ones that confess? Wouldn't that be sad? Or we want to learn the bare minimum. I just want to learn John 3:16. Everybody memorizes that one. But I don't want to have a discussion about what it really means. Get into any kind of depth. Bring any other Bible verses to bear. I just want to say, for God so loved the world, that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but will have everlasting life. That's it. Then everybody will know I'm a Christian. And it's like, what does that mean? That's like saying, I don't really want to explain to you why God gave His only begotten Son, or even have you tell me that it doesn't really represent love. God so loved the world in a way that most people might think about it. It really means more, God loved the world thus, God loved the world in this way, which takes it out of the realm that they're probably thinking about it, but into a better place. Then there's other people who go to an extreme of, all I'm going to do is tell you that you're a sinner, so that someday I can finally tell you you're saved, you need a Savior. Or other people that believe in this cliche that goes something like, people won't care what you know until they know that you care. Who decides when they know that you care? And does that even prove itself out to be true? How long do you have to spend getting to know somebody before you'll be bold enough to share the good news with them, to have a conversation with them, especially if they're another Christian from a different tradition? seems like an easy out to me, and that's a whole other discussion for another day. But it seems like an easy out to say, well, I really want to share the good news with this person, God, but I haven't gotten the impression that they know that I care yet. So I will someday. I will someday. That's what kept me from jumping too headstrong into doing any kind of videos or podcasting, because even though I was teaching, and I felt very confident in teaching because I would prepare as well as I could, I would run stuff by the pastors, I would cross-reference through the scriptures, I would do all these other things. There was always a fear of making a mistake, which I still to this day take as a healthy thing. I grew up doing some theater. You probably can't tell that by my persona, or lack of persona, on these videos and podcasts. But I grew up doing theater from the time I was very young, 3 or 4 years old. Probably still helping my friends doing some acting here and there. But I did all sorts of things. I did stuff in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, community theater, cable TV shows, tons of stuff. Not time to get into that now. But in that world, when I was doing theater, particularly community theater, I remember it was always good for me to be just a little bit terrified before a performance, before going out on stage. Not in a paralyzing way, but in a way that would make me have a focus, have some energy. A little stage fright was a good thing, and is a good thing. But if having stage fright, and in this context of sharing what we believe, teach, and confess, if having stage fright, because I don't have the large catechism memorized, I don't have the Augsburg Confession memorized, I don't have every apologetic worked out in my head. If somebody asks me about abortion, I don't have a list of scriptures that I can go to. If somebody asks me about homosexual relationships, and I don't have a good apologetic for that and a list of scriptures for that. And if somebody asks me about baptism, all I can think of is, one passage, and I can't even remember what book it's in, but I know it said something about baptism saving me. And somebody could ask you about the Lord's Supper, and you can certainly say, well, Jesus says is, and I believe is means is, but I said Lord's Supper, right? I hope so. But we get to this point where, like, I've heard so many people do this so much better that I'm just going to back off and I'm not going to do anything, because I might make a mistake, and if I make a mistake, then people are going to think, oh, that poor guy. That poor guy. He made a mistake. He calls himself a Christian, but he didn't know that this passage was in 1 Peter and not in Philippians, whatever. And I want to get everything right. I want to make sure my confession is true. I want to have a good Christology. I want to follow the rule of faith. And these are things that, again, throwing around big words. But I don't want to be heterodox, and I certainly don't want to be heretical. And that can be what keeps a lot of people from making a good confession before the world. I'm not a pastor, so I can't go out there and actually try and share what I believe, teach, and confess with other people. Yes, you can. Work hard at getting it right. But yes, you can. And when you get it wrong, don't be afraid. When you get it wrong, be a big enough person to say, I got that wrong. Did I say Jesus rose on the fourth day? I meant on the third day. I was politically gaffe prone, given that it's the political season right now. When isn't it the political season, by the way? Seems like it's always the political season. But don't be afraid. I've had to go on rare occasion, where I've said something and actually misspoke it. There's a famous one from a class that I used to lead in rotation with other gentlemen. I'll share that with you. How about that? This is the tough part of the road, so I just have to get over as fast as I can before people run me over. Here comes a guy, and here comes another guy, and everybody seems to think that it's the Autobahn. So be safe, Chris. Okay, now they want to go over there. Anyway, back to being safe. I was leading. I'm going to start this thing again here on Cafe Sola. It's very similar to something that Pastor Wolfmiller and Pastor Gigline ended up doing on their Table Talk Radio, where they do 10 Commandments in the news. But the church I go to, back then, they were looking for new ideas for new classes to get more people in class, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants more people attending Bible class. Sadly, unless you're a small church and you can somehow manage to get most of the people into some form of class, there is a very small percentage of people that either go to class before going to divine service, or go to divine service and then go to class. Most of them just leave. And I fell into that category for a while when I was in the Roman church, and early on in the Lutheran church. But when I joined the Lutheran church, I really wanted to be in Bible class. It just seemed like Lutherans do this. Lutherans go to Bible class. And it wasn't until later that I found out that that isn't always the case. So anyway, so there was this class that we started, that we had built a new family life center, and there was this area, this door area, where people were always coming in because it was closer to where they were parking. And this guy who was leading that, he was director of education, or I don't remember exactly what his title was, but he wanted to start a class, and he found 5 or 6 guys that he thought would like to rotate through facilitating, they called it back then. We would facilitate discussions, which I right away had a problem with. It's like, so none of us are actually teaching this class. We're just facilitating discussion. That could go really bad real quick if it's just a bunch of opinions. We get 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 people sitting around just sharing their opinions, and who's going to norm it all with scripture? And he said, well, don't worry about it. There'll be scripture. I said, yeah, but if the people facilitating don't do their study and learn what's going on with those scriptures and how they apply, then it still could go really wrong really quick. And long story short, eventually it did at times. But it was called the Bible Coffee Cafe because who doesn't like coffee? And I'm sure there's some tea drinkers out there. But it was the Bible Coffee Cafe, and the concept of it, which I'm going to try and bring back, is this idea that water cooler talk. There was all these people that would gather at work and share their opinions, which is why I had the problem with this going bad really quick. Share their opinions with other people from their pagan / non doctrinally sound Christian point of view, if they would do that. And usually it was the non-believing point of view, and there would be something going on in the headlines like today, the coronavirus, or or the ongoing one throughout all the time being the homosexuality, gay marriage, abortion stuff. Or one of the classes we had back when was there was a hurricane that hit Haiti, and I got that class. That was a lot of fun. So the people and the hurricanes hitting New Orleans, whatever, and so all these God judgment kind of stuff. And the guy who was preparing the facilitation sheet would put the newspaper headline on one side and the scriptures on the other side, and we would read through it. He would highlight stuff in the article for us to focus on, and then he would even put numbers and say this part of the article references to scripture 1, this one to scripture 2, this one to scripture 3. Or did I do that? I might have done that myself. Anyway, it was fairly well organized and a good class. And I may be starting something like that up here on the cafe, hopefully, as more of a live thing where I just do this thing in my car, but I'll do it somewhere else at home maybe. Now where did I think I got off track, but the idea being that training ourselves to be able to confess, and training ourselves in being able to respond and not being so afraid. Oh, I remember the story. I was going to tell you the story. In the class one time, I wasn't leading this particular class. I was just one of the members, because everybody who led or facilitated was supposed to also participate. So there was going to be at least 6 people in the class all the time. And that was tricky. But I quoted a Chinese proverb one time, and as if it was a Christian proverb. And my wife, she loves me so much. She's like, that's a Chinese proverb, and I'll never live it down. We laugh about it so much nowadays. It's so hilarious. And this is 20 years later. But I had to live down, so to speak, the idea that, I just threw that out there because I was so confident I wanted to participate, and yet I was so wrong, so wrong, and just admit to the class, hey, that was, I really, really, really thought, and you want to know which proverb it was? Which Chinese proverb it was? I think it was Chinese. It might not even have been a Chinese proverb, but it's really not scriptural, but Christians throw it around all the time, and that's probably why I thought it was a Christian thing, and maybe a Christian concept, kind of. But it was about if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And I quoted that as if it was chapter and verse, and I'll never live it down. I even myself bring it up, and that's one of the ways that it helps, is to bring it up yourself and not shy away from it. So that's the whole point. We shy away from sharing because we're afraid to make those kind of mistakes and have people think, oh, see, you weren't all that smart. You shouldn't have been sharing, or you shouldn't have been leading that class or facilitating that class because you thought a Chinese proverb was scripture. Well, if I dug my heels in and said, yeah, you guys are wrong, this is a Christian, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to now take a text into the scriptures and proof text. I'm going to make it work, and you guys are going to believe that that this is not a Chinese proverb, it's a Christian proverb. And if I was willing to do that, then that would be like the worst possible thing. But instead, I humbled myself, or was humbled by God and my wife, by God through my wife, and I'm willing to say I got it wrong, and now I'm sharing it with you guys, and isn't that great? Let me get through backing up here. Beep, 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 beep. There we go. So I hesitated for the longest time making any kind of podcast or any kind of video because I didn't want to get stuff wrong. And I'm going to from time to time, especially when I don't work from a script, which most of the time I don't. Um, and if you see me pausing for long periods of time, I'm trying to make sure that I word something carefully and word it correctly. That's not always the best thing for a podcast, which is really like a radio show. You don't want to have dead air. But I just wanted to put this out there. I don't know if it helps you or makes any sense to you whatsoever, but I just wanted to share and say that if you have things that you want to say, confessions you want to make, that are biblical confessions, Lutheran confessions, don't be afraid. Get out there and make them. And there will be people who will attack you. There will even be Lutherans who will attack you and shame you in a sense, which is sad, to make you feel like you responded to this post or that tweet or whatever, and they just want to make you feel about as small as they can sometimes. And it doesn't happen often in the Lutheran world, but there are people out there that do, and there are people outside of the Lutheran world that really, really want to shut you down. And I think they want to shut you down because even if you got 95% of it right, missed a word, missed a piece of punctuation, whatever, that if they can get you to shut down, they can silence your confession. And silencing our confession means our confession won't be heard for sure, and it means that it could die. The scriptures will never pass away, as the scriptures say somewhere, right? It's not a proverb. Is that a proverb? No. But the scriptures say, my word will never pass away. Because you think about how many times in history people have tried to shut it down, and all it does is God says, okay, you're not going to shut it down. It's going to be here until, I say so, and then for all eternity. So this is the point where I'm starting to ramble because I'm not driving. When I'm driving, I'm a little more focused. But just have the confidence. Read, study. With the scriptures, what are we supposed to do? Read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest. Why? So we can have our bellies full, so that we can have our minds full, or so that we can share with other people. So there will be times when I might ramble a little bit, like right now. And there are times when, if you don't listen to the volume of what somebody puts out there, you might think they need help. But as far as yourself, just don't be afraid to share the truth. And if you get something wrong, even with the confessions, if you say, the Lutheran Church believes this and somebody can prove to you otherwise, just learn from it. And particularly with the scriptures, if you say, I don't know, like how many people even think about how the Trinity works, what Jesus does according to his human nature, what Jesus does according to his divine nature. That's really deep stuff, and people will want to drag you into those deep discussions, and it's either to make you learn, make themselves look better, or make you look lesser. Hopefully they're doing it from a right point of view and a right perspective, because they want you to have a good confession. And that's what I want. I want myself to have a good confession, and I want other people to have a good confession, and then for us to share. Call to action. Like, subscribe, ring the bells, whatever you have to do, and share. And maybe other people will be encouraged to do driving videos. I was doing driving videos, by the way, before Pastor Wolfmiller was doing driving videos. I just never published any of them because I was holding back. I would put my thoughts out there. I was going to call them Cafe Sola on the go. There were some before even the ones that are out there that I recorded. And I do a lot of thinking and praying and meditating on my drives. So I was putting these things on the camera, on recording them. And then I'd watch them later and I'd go, well, I think they're right. Yeah, they're right. But, who am I to do that? And then Pastor Wolfmiller started doing them, and I'm like, oh man, Pastor Wolfmiller actually does them well, and he beat me to it. And now it's going to look like I'm copying him, and he certainly wasn't copying me because he had never seen anything that I had done. But don't be afraid of that either. Don't be afraid to share in a similar way that somebody else is sharing, because you may have a different audience. You may have a similar audience, and they may like it. You may develop a totally different audience, and that would be good. It could be 5 or 6 people. It could be 154 people, like the YouTube channel is currently at. We got over 150. I'd like to get up the notch there to the next level, get to 200, only because it helps YouTube put it higher up in searches and stuff like that, as opposed to me being able to say, look how awesome I am. Because, I'm a sinner just like you, and I'm going to make mistakes. And not many, but when I do, sometimes they're doozies, like teach a man to fish. So don't be afraid to confess. People that believe otherwise are certainly not going to be afraid to confess. And, one last thing. I remember sitting at work. We used to always sit around at the lunch table, and it's amazing that this is where the Bible Coffee Cafe idea came right into play. We would sit around the table at work, and all of the people who were unbelievers, believers of different traditions, or atheists, sometimes polite atheists and sometimes angry atheists, they were very happy to share what they believed. And nobody was shutting them down and telling them, don't share that unbiblical thought here at the lunch table. So one day I went home and I said, well, if they're willing to be so bold about sharing their false belief, I should be pretty bold, or at least bolder, about sharing the truth. And then opportunity came, and I shared the truth one day at lunch. And you'll never guess what the responses were. One particular person, who was often one of the people that shared the most of their unbelief, said, oh, well, that's right. We're not supposed to talk about religion and politics. We're just supposed to talk about other stuff at lunchtime. That's what happens. But I committed myself at that point to learning to be less timid, learning to be more bold, to share what I believe and do it with gentleness and respect. And when I don't, to ask for forgiveness. But most of the time, I don't yell, and I get passionate at times, but I don't yell. So hopefully you don't hear me yelling. That's it for now. I'd like to just encourage you again to like and subscribe and share, pass it along, and tell people to watch all the way through or listen all the way through. That matters to all those algorithm things. Sometimes people say, oh, I watched 3 minutes of that, I'm moving on to the next thing. It's a podcast. Even the video can be treated like a podcast. Just listen to the whole thing, because there's often something at the end that's equally worth listening to than what's at the beginning. For a lot of people. Hopefully for this. I don't know. You be the judge. This is Chris with Cafe Sola. Thanks for being with me on my drive to work today, and I will talk with you next time. God's blessings.